Well, folks, the first step in delivering on President Trump's domestic agenda of cutting taxes by $4.5 trillion for the middle class and reducing government spending by $2 trillion has passed its first hurdle. Now, last night, Mike Johnson was able to cobble together enough representatives to very narrowly pass this budget resolution to get the ball rolling to enact President Trump's agenda. Obviously, we know that the Senate also has a competing bill versus the House bill, so we're going to see how this all plays out. But before we get into it here, I just want to say thank you to all of our new subscribers we've picked up over the last week or two. And if you're new to our channel here, watching this for the first time, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. Now, the bill was passed last night on a very close vote of 217 to 215 for the budget resolution. This is Donald Trump's one big, beautiful bill that he has endorsed, is the bill that was able to pass the House last night. Like we said, it's going to cut taxes by about $4.5 trillion. We're going to see about a $4 trillion raise in the debt limit, and then decrease in spending by about $2 trillion over that same period of time. At the last minute, Mike Johnson was able to get all of the votes that he needed to get this passed. Only one representative, Thomas Massie from Kentucky, voted against it, who raised concerns about the plan adding to the U.S. deficit. He was the sole Republican to vote against it, and all Democrats voted against it as well. Now, this is a huge win for Mike Johnson and passing President Trump's one big, beautiful bill. He needed to get this. This right now allows for other processes to begin. This is just the blueprint, remember that. Because what the budget resolution actually is, it's just a blueprint to unlock future spending legislation to enact President Trump's domestic agenda. Obviously we want to see things like border security, energy policy, and tax cuts, which in the House bill, it's all one big beautiful bill in there. With the Senate, they want to split it up into two different bills, and we can get into later why I think it is a much better idea to do it as one big beautiful bill now. Obviously, there are downsides to both, but I think you get more of what we want with one big beautiful bill, especially when you're looking at the midterms. There's a big priority to get this taken care of now. All of it. Border security, energy, tax cuts. Like we said, it calls for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, $2 trillion in spending cuts, and a $4 trillion increase to the debt ceiling. Now, it doesn't give specifics. Like we said, it's just a blueprint. It does not give specifics on what could be cut. It directs the Energy and Commerce Committee to slash $880 billion in spending that they oversee. That's overseen by the Energy and Commerce Committee. Now, like we said, there was a number of holdouts towards the end. There was probably a handful, 5, 6, 7, that were holdouts that were a part of the House Freedom Caucus that eventually fell in line after talking with President Trump, talking with Speaker Mike Johnson. They were able to fall in line. They were able to vote for this bill here. Like we said, there was one person, Thomas Massie, voted against it. And now initially, when the House leadership proposed this bill, they were only going to propose an initial $1 trillion in cuts. There's a lot of people on the I don't want to say hard right, the right flank of the party that were not okay with that. They were not okay with increasing the debt limit and cutting revenue at the same time when we're only going to cut $1 trillion in spending. When they were able to get it up to $2 trillion in spending that they're going to cut, that got a lot of people, of representatives on board with the bill. Now, at this point, what's next? What is the process that they're going to have to go through next? Well, the Senate must also adopt this same budget resolution that they passed here. So, like we said, it starts with the budget resolution, a blueprint Congress sets out every year. We want to cut spending by this amount. We want to raise revenue by this amount. It's not law. It's just an internal plan that the House and the Senate have to agree on. Now, at that point, when they agree on it, that's when reconciliation kicks in, which includes more of the specific reconciliation instructions that tells committees what to do. Like, okay, this committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, you need to cut $880 billion in spending that you oversee. That is over the next 10 years. So although we know that's how much they need to cut right now, the specifics aren't given to them to go and actually go through the reconciliation process to cut that money once we have to get the Senate to approve on this as well. So, like we said, this just sets out the scope for what's going to be tackled later. Now, once both chambers pass identical budget resolutions, that's when the real action begins. All the instructions go to relevant committees. If they want to cut, if a resolution calls for $1 trillion in saving from health programs, well, that's the Energy and Commerce Committee. Or Medicare reform, that's the Energy and Commerce Committee. Now, these pieces are then, once all the different pieces from the budget resolution go to their individual committees, each committee comes up with their own resolution, the reconciliation process, and then all of those budgets or bills are stitched together by the budget committee into one big reconciliation bill. So it's one big single package that will include tax cuts, spending reductions, debt ceiling hikes, energy policy, border security, all of that stuff, which then that's one bill that would then be voted on by the House, the Senate, and then sent to the President Trump's desk. Now, as we know, in the reconciliation process, they just need a simple majority in the House of 218 votes for it to pass. You can't filibuster it. Debate time is limited, I believe, I think it's about 20 hours. Debate is capped at, unless there are amendments, which can stretch things out. But there is one catch to it. You have the Byrd Rule, which applies in the Senate. This rule basically is a provision that affects the budget, and not just, it basically makes the budget only reflective of spending revenue or debt, and not just a policy wish list. So if there are things that are regarding border security or energy policy, it must have a clear fiscal tie, because it will get stripped if it's not cleverly framed inside of the budget reconciliation package. Now, if the House and Senate pass different versions of the bill, they're going to reconcile those differences through a committee. Usually it's pretty informal. Once they both can agree on the same text, it then goes to the president. If it's signed into law at that point, or that's where it's sent to the president, signed into law. If he vetoes it, obviously we know Congress needs a 2/3 majority to override it, which is not likely. But as we know, the reconciliation process is a powerful shortcut, but it's narrow. It's only for budget matters. It doesn't have broad policy overhaul, and can only really be used once, maybe twice in a budget per year, in a fiscal year. That's how Trump was able to get his initial 2017 tax cuts passed with 51 votes in the Senate. That's why Mike Johnson's team is banking to push Trump's agenda, his domestic agenda, through in 2025 using this here. Now, the big question is, it comes down to cuts. Where are we going to see these cuts from? Now, as we know, it's going to be expected that the Energy and Commerce Committee needs to cut $880 billion from within their jurisdiction. And here you can have a breakdown of what spending they oversee. They oversee, over the next 10 years, they oversee $25 trillion in spending. Each one of these blocks represent, I believe it's 250 billion. So 4 is a trillion. So it's like you got $25 trillion here. A big chunk of that is Medicaid. A even bigger chunk is Medicare, and then other health and non-health related budget items, line items that they oversee. Now, how are they going to cut this? There's a couple options. I think the most feasible one with the least amount of political blowback is going to be Medicaid. Medicare, those people, they've worked, and they did, and not just they worked hard, they paid their money in, they deserve the benefits. Nothing else. But you can also cut everything else the committee oversees that's not Medicare and Medicaid. That's still going to leave them about $600 billion short of what they're going to need in order to reach that $880 billion. And what I see here, the biggest thing is going to be Medicare cuts. And not necessarily just cuts, but changes to rules. I think the biggest one that I personally would like to see, regardless of if we're increasing spending, is establishing a work requirement for adults without disabilities and without young children. Even if they have young children, I would be okay putting a work requirement on them. Everybody needs to go to work. If you want Medicaid, if you want the government to pay for your health insurance, you need to go to work. Hopefully, if you go to work, you're going to get a job, which is going to get you off Medicaid, which you can enroll in their health program. So it's not on the taxpayer dime. I see that as that is a big target for me. If you're receiving federal benefits like this, you need to work. And if you don't have a disability, you need to work. You got to go to work. And all it is right now is like in the states where they do have work requirements like Georgia, it's like the work requirement's like 20 hours a week. Like you could work Monday and Tuesday a 10-hour shift and then have 5 days to dick off. Like it's an absolute joke that's what we're like. You need to get a full-time job at a minimum, like 30 hours a week, I think. I'd say 28 to 30 at a minimum. I'm very comfortable with that approach. Cut in Medicaid. And it's not even cutting. It's just requiring people to go to work, which in turn, they're going to be able to apply for benefits through their employer. They're not going to qualify for certain tax credits if they have health insurance that's provided through their employer. If you want to be on the taxpayer dimes, you got to go to work, which hopefully when you go to work, we're going to get you off of the taxpayer dime. Another thing that you can look at how often states can check eligibility of, really it's how often can they check incomes, or if it's based on income or assets, how often can they check this? During COVID, a lot of these states, technically they can check it once a year. State Medicare programs can. I know plenty of state Medicare programs that just auto-renew these policies, and they don't even check income. They just auto-renew it. What a joke. They need to go through the process every year. If you're going to be on Medicaid, you need to go through the process every single year. Submit your income in, submit your assets. Do you have a health insurance policy that's offered through your work? Do you have one that meets the minimum value standard? There's a lot of things. Now, if you want the taxpayers to pay for it, to pay for your health insurance, you're going to have to go through a vigorous process to do that. I think those are the two biggest things that I look at. Obviously, you can look at just not renewing certain provisions where we are providing tax dollars to states to run their Medicaid programs there, which could save hundreds of billions of dollars. Ultimately, that's going to come at the cost of the individuals who are on Medicare or Medicaid. There could be backlash to that. There will be backlash. And here's the little secret. There's a much bigger issue than just, okay, we're going to tweak it here, tweak it there. We need a fundamental change to the structure of Medicaid. Here's the issue. Just like with DOGE, we can cut around the corners. We can cut $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, a couple billion here, $100 billion there. We can cut around the edges. But at the end of the day, that is not what is driving our national debt right now. It's exacerbating it, but it is not driving it. What is driving our national debt right now is our entitlement programs. Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. Those are the three biggest line items for the federal budget in 2025. It's like, if we're being honest about this, we need to have serious restructuring on that. You want to look here? Let's look what we have here. Medicare and Medicaid on a yearly basis, $1.6 trillion. Social Security, $1.5 trillion. Defense spending, almost $900 billion. Interest on the debt, $1 trillion per year. We need serious structural reform in our Medicare and Medicaid programs and Social Security. And I know nobody wants to touch it, and neither does Trump, and I don't blame him. But ultimately, if you want to fix the problem, you need to look at the largest line items: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the interest on our debt. We must have, it's like, you think about it. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. That's what it is. It is a Ponzi scheme. When it was established 70, 80 years ago, the people who received the first benefits had never paid into it before. The people who were paying on their payroll taxes into the Social Security Trust Fund, that money was instantly going to pay benefits to people who had never paid into it. So you created this imbalance where the initial people never paid into it, but received benefits, which means on the back end, you're going to have to make up for it in order to even this out, where you're going to have people who pay into Social Security who are never going to receive a benefit. I go throughout my life thinking that I am never going to receive a dime of Social Security. I invest in a 401k, a Roth IRA. I have separate investments outside of Social Security. It's like Social Security took like $4,000 from me last year. I'm like, it's like, what a joke. But I know I'm never going to see that money. And you think if you were to take that money, put it into an index fund, the S&P 500, hold it. If you did $4,000 a year, you'd have millions and millions and millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. It's like you probably have close to $10 million by the time you were at retirement age. But nope, it's getting paid into the Social Security Trust Fund, the Ponzi scheme that the federal government created. And now my generation is going to have to reap really the unfortunate, the disastrous results of their negligence. Because that's what it is. It's pure negligence what they did. It's a Ponzi scheme. We put, what's his name? Bernie Madoff in jail for doing the exact same thing in a private sector entity. But then when we label it as Social Security, it all of a sudden isn't a Ponzi scheme. By definition, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. We need structural reform to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and you have to acknowledge that whoever does the reform, whoever flinches first, is most likely going to be out of power for a very long time in Washington, D.C. And that's just the unfortunate. Do you want to do what's right for your party or what's right for your country? I think we need to do what's right for the country. We need to reform these programs, whether it's privatizing Social Security. Look what George W. Bush tried to do during his administration. Privatize Social Security. Each person will have an individual account that this money went into. But then how do you pay for the people who deserve money, who are owed money, who paid money in? The thing is there is no big pot of money in Social Security. It's a pot of money that's constantly revolving, that's constantly paying out benefits. And payroll taxes are what's funding it. Do you want to look at raising the cap on Social Security income? That's a way you could go about it. It's like there's a lot of different things outside of raising the actual percentage of payroll taxes that go in there. So that's my take on what needs to happen. But ultimately, when we're looking at what can be cut, we need to make sure that states are checking income and asset limits on a yearly basis at a minimum. No auto-renew. Number 2, we need to make sure that if you apply for Medicaid and you don't have a disability, and even if you have children, I don't take what the New York Times says here. Even if you have children, you need to go to work. Unless you have a qualified reason, you need to go to work. You got to go to work. And I don't feel bad. Get your ass off the couch and go to work. So that's going to wrap things up for today. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Where do you think that we should be cutting money from the federal government outside of the waste, fraud, and abuse? Because that's only going to add up to so much at the end of the day. Do you think it's a good idea to go for Medicaid and not Medicare, which I think is the best? We're going to see what happens. But drop down below, hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. And as always, we'll catch you next time.